Hello, everybody. Welcome to my home in Austin, Texas, and to Build 2020. My name is Nick Molnar, and I'm a program manager on the Visual Studio Codespaces team. And this is my session, Remote Development with Visual Studio Codespaces. Up on the screen here, you can see how you can contact me on Twitter or GitHub, so feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to help you. Today, what I wanted to do is take a little bit of time to look at how Visual Studio Codespaces can help you with remote development, which is maybe even more pertinent than ever given everything that's going on. Before we begin, though, let's dive into and look at why did we build Visual Studio Codespaces? You know, as the team and I go out and talk to developers around the world, we keep on hearing the same reoccurring trends appear over and over again. That developers more and more are moving to microservices-based architectures, which is enabling developers to use multiple languages and multiple stacks, kind of a polyglot development technique that allows them to take advantage of any particular technology's strengths. Additionally, more and more organizations are leveraging open source and inner source to make collaboration easier and better. And so as a result, more developers are working across the boundary of more code bases and often multiple code bases at the same time to improve the organizational throughput overall. Of course, with everything going on in the world today with our pandemic, distributed teams are almost required, but we were seeing much more of a movement towards distributed teams anyways, or maybe teams leveraging freelancers or other kind of developers that are with their team temporarily. And then lastly, the thing that never really seems to slow down is time to market just continues to increase and increase in importance. And we always need to kind of drive towards that. So looking at all of these trends, our team took a step back and said, well, how can we help? And Visual Studio Codespaces is kind of what we've come up with. But the main question that we should answer before we dive into all of the demos that I have prepared for you is what even is a code space? So a code space is all about context and setting the right context for you as a developer to be productive. All professionals have a context. Chefs have kitchens, athletes have gyms, where they have special equipment that is arranged and composed in such a way that makes them as efficient as possible. A code space is the environment for you as a developer, and it has all of the tools and gear that you need set up and configured so you could be productive for your task at hand. So for developers, that includes the editor in which you choose to work on your code, and I will show you some of our editor options as we move throughout the demos, as well as the source code for the project that you're actually working on. Now that source code runs on top of some kind of runtime. Maybe that's .NET or Node or Java, but you need those things to be installed. And then unless you're perfect, which if you're anything like me, you're not, we have a debugger that will help us find and fix problems. Our applications often have packages that need to be installed that we're depending on. There's other additional tooling, CLI tooling to help us interact with databases or configure various parts of our system. The terminal, where we use a lot of that tooling, extensions to our editor, and other various bits of configuration. Now, these things are all important, but the two most important things to a code space are the project that you're working on and you. And so I've illustrated what a code space is as a set of gears that are all interlocking together. And as a developer, you've probably been in the situation before where sometimes you're maybe worried to upgrade the version of one thing because that might break the entire chain of cogs that makes up your environment. But I also wanted to point out here with this illustration that the project that you're working on is what's important. And that's different for everybody. Everybody works on different projects, at least across different teams. And a code space allows you to customize the environment per project, but also you are important. You have your own set of personalizations just for the way that you like things, colors, themes, fonts, things like that. And we wanted to make sure that that would be available to you in a code space as well. So let's go ahead and dive in and look a little bit more at what a code space might bring you. Now, to do that, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm a huge baseball fan. In fact, this brick wall behind me and this catcher's chest protector are just kind of some of the things that I have in my office to remind me of baseball. And since 2003, I've been on a journey to see a game at every major league stadium. I've kept track of how I do this many different ways. Um, There's my MLB Passport, which is literally a book that I go and I get stamps on that show what stadiums I've been to. Here's when I went to the stadium in Atlanta. I used to collect ticket stubs, but I can no longer collect ticket stubs because they're all digital, like this one from when I went to Yankee Stadium, which isn't really that slick. So instead, what I've done is I've gone off and I've built an app to help me keep track of these stadiums. Now, I know what you're saying because I'm a geek, nerd, dev, just like you. Baseball? Does anybody even care about that game? I used to feel the same way, but then I found out the truth about baseball. Take a look at this. So now that you know the true story about how the Death Star was destroyed, hopefully you'll be a little bit more into baseball and you can go on this journey with me. So over in GitHub, I have a repository for keeping track of my ballpark tracker application. I have a screenshot built into the README so you can see what that might look like. There's also this note that mentions that the project requires Node.js and MongoDB to be installed. Unfortunately, if I go and I look on my terminal, I don't have Node installed. Uh-oh, what am I going to do? That's okay. A CodeSpace can solve this problem for me. Now, if I'd like to, I can use a CodeSpace directly integrated with GitHub by clicking on the green code button and then open with CodeSpaces. This native GitHub integration is currently in private preview. I'll give you a link at the end to go and sign up for this. Today, I'll show you how you can use CodeSpaces with Azure, which is available to use immediately. To do so, I'm going to use this Create CodeSpaces button, which opens up online.visualstudio.com. Now, CodeSpaces used to be called Visual Studio Online. It was recently renamed. And so this is one place in the URL where it still says online. If I accidentally say online or CodeSpaces, just know I'm using them interchangeably, but CodeSpaces is the correct name going forward. I can type in whatever name I want to for my CodeSpace, as well as the repository, which is already filled in, and I can go ahead and hit create. Now, within a matter of 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute, an environment will be created for me. To save a little bit of time, I'll switch over to this one called Ballpark Tracker that was already created for me. And by clicking on that link, you can see I'm getting Visual Studio Code running in the browser. I have all of my files. I get syntax highlighting as I would expect, and everything looks just the way I want it to. My theme that I like, the dark theme, is applied, as well as my fonts and other visual properties and settings that I prefer. Let me go ahead and open up VS Code on my desktop. Once I have, I'm going to go ahead and change my theme to the light theme. And you'll notice that CodeSpaces keeps the theme that I've set locally. I can also change any other settings that I want to. Like here, I'll go ahead and change the font. I'm using Fira code right now. Let's get rid of that and change it to Consolis. And maybe we'll bump up the font from 14 to 18. And notice as I'm making these changes on the right, my settings are being synced so that I see them in any code space that I have on the left. Actually, 18 is a little big. Let's go ahead and reset that setting. We'll go back down to 14, and we can kind of continue on with our demo here. Now, in addition to my personalizations around themes and fonts and some of the settings that I just showed you, I'm also going to open up a new terminal. Immediately, you'll notice that my terminal has this blue and green prompt that's been personalized for me. That's because CodeSpaces automatically pull in my .files repository so that I'm able to keep things like aliases and prompts and any other configurations that I want to follow me from CodeSpace to CodeSpace. It really makes using CodeSpaces feel like local. Here, I'm using my favorite alias, Party, which paints a Nyan cat. It's total nonsense, but it's also fun. And let me CLS the screen. That's another alias for the Linux command clear. Now that shows off some of the personalization, but there's also customization. This repository needs a few things to be able to run appropriately. So let me look and see what version of Node I'm running now. Oh, 12.16. That's great. That's exactly what this code base needs to run. And if you go and create a code space based off of my Ballpark Tracker repository, you'll also get version 12.16.1. Now you saw earlier I didn't have Node installed on my machine, but now this is saying that I do. That's because everything that's happening within this window is happening in the context of the remote code space running in Azure. In fact, if I look at the uname, I'm actually running Linux, even though this is clearly a Windows box. Other customizations that come along for the ride, I've automatically got all of my Node modules. So if you've ever done Node development before, you know the common first step after you've cloned a repository is to run npm install. And that's just happening for these environments, making onboarding very fast for developers new to the project. In addition, any extensions that are required to work successfully with this project are automatically installed as well. I have ESLint installed, and I can go and fix any problems that ESLint saw, like putting a space into this comment. And I can install any extension because this is the full power of Visual Studio Code. So let me install this map preview. It requires a reload, which in the browser is just refreshing the browser. The refresh happens. I can go ahead and open up the GeoJSON file that encodes all of the data for all the different ballparks around North America. And I can run the map preview extension, which, as you'll see, paints a map with all of the data points plotted out. I can pinch and zoom on my screen, select any of the individual data points that I want to, and this just shows that all of the extensions are available for me to go off and use. Of course, this is VS Code, which is an editor with integrated terminal and debugger. So I can set a breakpoint, I can run, I can hit my breakpoint, look at variables, add watches, see the call stack, do any of those types of things that you would expect. And when I run the app, it pops open a new tab and allows me to browse the app. Even though it's running on a remote machine, I can view it as if it was local with automatic port forwarding. Here you go. We can zoom in on any of the different ballparks. Here's Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. And now I'm happy to report that last June, I flew up to Detroit and I saw a game at Comerica Park, the last stadium I needed to go to. I've been to all 30 of them. Lifetime dream completed. I'm very excited about it. And so what I really want to do with you all today is go off and check the last stadium. Let's go check off Comerica Park on my tracking app so we can see that I have all 30 stadiums visited. Unfortunately, I've seen a bug floating around on the app, so we're going to need to fix it. So in my app, if I go and find Comerica Park in Detroit, and I try to check that it's visited, I'm unable to check it. It just keeps on becoming undone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back over to CodeSpaces, and I'm going to use a feature that's built into all CodeSpaces called IntelliCode. IntelliCode is our AI-assisted auto-completion. What we do is we scan code on GitHub and your own code base to find out how people are actually using the APIs that you know and love. So for example, this MongoDB string, if I trigger an auto-completion, I'll get 5 options with a star next to them. That's IntelliCode at work. It's saying that in this context, most people would replace or split a string. That's the most commonly used methods. But it's smarter than just the most commonly used, it's context aware. So inside of an if statement, the suggestion would be for length or index of. So I can use that as a predicate. Now this is great for exploring APIs that maybe you're not familiar with. So here I'm going to try to figure out how to fix this problem by saying app dot. Oh, use, that's exactly what I need to do. That's how I can set some middleware. In this case, I need to be using the Express middleware for parsing JSON. So let's go ahead and make that change and go back and see if my ballpark tracker app works now. So I'll refresh the browser, find Detroit again. And woohoo, 30 for 30, complete with a little celebrate emoji. Way to go, Nick. Now that I've completed that life goal, I'm ready to take the next challenge and visit all of the AAA stadiums in the Pacific Coast and international minor leagues. Let's go ahead and add these stadiums to the ballpark tracker so I can start checking them off. To do that, what I need to figure out is how to get both the MLB and AAA ballparks to show up on the map at the same time. I'm pretty sure I've seen the code to do this where a fetch is done. I bet that's the place that I need to fix this up. Let me just find it real quick because I want to show it to my buddy Scott. I know he can help me. All right, here, let me pull in Scott so we can pair together on fixing this. He's a real wizard with the database. Looks like he's available, so let me just click on this and I'll invite him right into this code space. Oh, hey, Nick. Yeah, I see that you're inviting me to collaborate with you. Give me 1 second, I'll be right there. Awesome, Scott. I know you can see all my code in my code space now, but what I'm trying to do is add the AAA ballparks to my tracker. I think it's related to the database code that's right here. Oh, cool. Yeah. I see what you're showing me with this cursor here. You think it's this fetch statement, huh? I don't know. Let me see. You know what, dude? Let me splunk around the database. Can I use the Codespaces terminal? Yeah, sure. Let me give you permissions. Cool. Got it. Thanks. Let me play around with the data set. You should be able to follow along with what I'm doing in your terminal window. All right. First, let me connect to the Mongo container that's set up in this environment. And let me see what database you're using. Test. All right. Let me switch to the ballpark tracker. How many parks do you have in here? 60? All right. All right. It seems like you should be showing more than the 30 that you were showing in the app. Let me look at the shape of these documents. Oh, hold on. That's ugly. I'm going to pretty it up. Oh, I see. You're storing the league under properties. Let me focus in on just that so I can see all of the data I need to. All right. It looks like these records are for AAA stadiums. I'm going to page through and see what else there is. Oh, just AAA and MLB. That's all you want to show, right? All right. Let me show you how to fix this in the code. It looks like you're fetching this URL right here, and that's pointing to your Parks API. Okay, yeah, so cool. Come look over here. You see that? That's where you're filtering out the AAA parks. Let's just include all of the parks, since all you have is AAA and Major League, and we can do that by removing this filter. And now let me run the app real quick to make sure this works. Oh, all right. I see you're running the app. It's opening up on my screen now. Would you mind sharing that port with me so I can see it running on my side? Sure. Let me go forward port 3000 for you real quick. Perfect. I can see it now. I'm launching my browser. Fingers crossed. I can see all 60 stadiums now. Pretty slick. Ah, but no. I clicked on one of the new stadiums and the image on the map pin is broken. Oh, yeah. I need to upload those images. Let me do that real quick. All I have to do is drag them from my desktop into my code space. They'll automatically get uploaded and you should be able to see them then. All right, cool. They're uploaded. Let me refresh to test that. Oh, I'm gonna go refresh now too. Yep, I see them. Looks great, dude. All right, I gotta go. I'll catch you later. Man, I'm so grateful that Scott was able to help me out. That guy is so smart. When I grow up, I want to be just like him. So real quick, let's review what we've seen so far. We were able to create a code space that was customized for our project and personalized just for me. It included the source, the debugger, my packages, extensions, tools and runtimes, terminals and configuration. I was able to collaborate with peers like Scott and also leverage the power of machine learning with IntelliCode to explore new APIs. And the code space runs in Azure. I have the full power of Azure compute, networking, and storage, and I can connect to it with a browser, which means that I can flexibly work from anywhere on lots of different devices. Additionally, it's also possible to connect to those same environments using a desktop editor like VS Code or currently available in private preview Visual Studio IDE. Let's take a look at how that works. Over in my desktop installation of VS Code, I've installed the Visual Studio Codespaces extension from the extension gallery. Once I've installed that, I have a new icon that shows up in my activity bar called the Remote Explorer. And on that Remote Explorer, I'll see the list of code spaces that I've created. I have the ability to create a new one or connect to the one that's already existing, like the ballpark tracker. Now that still requires me to have an active internet connection to use the environment. And I often get the question, well, what about if I need to go offline? Well, the beauty of Codespaces is it's built on top of the Docker ecosystem, which means that if I also install the Remote Containers extension, which I have here, I'll be able to pull down my source code locally and re-leverage the existing Codespaces configuration even when I'm offline. So here I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab the clone URL, and I'll just clone this project really quickly to my desktop. Once that's done, I'll right-click on the folder and open inside of VS Code. And the Remote Containers extension will notice my dev container configuration file that we use for Codespaces. I can simply go ahead and hit the button to reopen the source code in a container. Now, because I have Docker running on my machine, VS Code will automate all of the Docker configuration. In this case, we're using Docker Compose to, one, build a Docker file that is my entire web server, and to also pull down the standard MongoDB image from Docker Hub. All of that will happen in the background for me. My source code will show up, and I will have an experience very similar to the one that I have in Codespaces, just locally. So this will take a moment to complete. And when it does, I'm able to look at files or do the things I would expect, even if I go and turn myself on airplane mode. So now with no network connection, I'm still able to run my app the same way that I was before. I'm able to open up Ballpark Tracker and browse around. And my dot files followed me as well. This is really awesome. So this is all super cool, but let's talk a little bit about how the service works in terms of billing and pricing. Visual Studio Codespaces is effectively a compute service that runs in Azure. We bill you only for the time that you're actively consuming the service. Now you get to choose how much horsepower you want to be running behind your code space. You can choose between basic, standard, and premium, and the amount of resources you get at each tier roughly doubles. Now what we do is we bill you down to the second for while you're using those resources. And if you add up all the seconds in an hour, it will cost you about 9 cents an hour to use a basic instance, 17 cents for a standard, and 34 for a premium instance. When you're not using the instance, and we will automatically detect if you've gone idle and shut it down, you pay a negligible price for storage that costs less than a fraction of a penny per hour. And because this is an Azure service, if you happen to have any Azure credits, whether it's from your Visual Studio subscription or MSDN credit, any Azure credits that you have, you can apply for paying for Visual Studio Codespaces. In addition to the Azure hosted model for a code space that we've been talking about today, there's also a model for self-hosting. So if you already have a machine, whether it be physical or virtual, that is configured in just the way that you like, maybe it's one that's sitting under your desk back at the office or in another part of your home, you can register that machine with Visual Studio Codespaces and get many of the benefits of the service, including the ability to connect to it flexibly from anywhere in the browser. Let me show you how to do that. I'm back in Visual Studio Code, the desktop edition, on the Remote Explorer panel. I have the ability to register a self-hosted code space. When I select that, it's going to ask which folder on my machine do I want to register, and we'll just go ahead and use my desktop. I can give this environment a name, and I'll call it my laptop, since I'm registering my laptop. And I'll go ahead and I'll run it as a process for now. This is going to make sure that there's a process running on my machine that gets connected into Visual Studio Codespaces up in the cloud. I'll allow any firewall access that's required. And once registered, I can head over to online.visualstudio.com, refresh, and see my laptop as an environment directly in the browser. I can click on it to connect just as you would expect. Let's go ahead and make a new file on my desktop, hello.txt. I'll open that up and throw a little message in there. And as soon as the connection completes, I'm able to open up the file on my local laptop in Visual Studio Code in the browser. And we can see that this is on my laptop message. Let's go ahead and update it from the web, from anywhere in the world I could be doing this. And if I look at that file locally, it's been updated. And of course, I can complete the loop and go back around just by typing a message and hitting save. Self-hosted is free, powerful, and awesome. You can register a self-hosted environment in VS Code as I just showed you, or if you prefer, you can go to our documentation and find out how to register it via command line tooling for Windows, Mac, or Linux. Self-hosting really is one of my favorite features, and it's a great way to try out Codespaces. But I know what you're thinking. Wait, Nick didn't show Visual Studio. That's all right. I was just saving the best for last. Let's take a look at that. Here in Visual Studio, I'm going to go ahead and go to File, connect to a code space. This UI will allow me to manage all of my code spaces. So, for example, let's go ahead and delete my laptop. I can also go ahead and create a new code space. For this, I'm going to go ahead and use a .NET Core app called eShop. It's a great little sample app that you can find out on GitHub. I'll go ahead and I'm going to create this environment. Now, thus far, we've been looking at running Linux-based environments. This one will be based on Windows. In just a few moments, it'll be up and running, so I'm able to connect to it. I'll just go ahead and click Connect. And my files pop up in the Solution Explorer. I'll go ahead and open this eShop on Web solution. Once that loads, all the compatible projects will be shown. Let's go ahead and set the web project as my startup project. And we'll kick off a build. Once the build has succeeded, I'll come over to Test Explorer, and I'll be able to see all of the tests that are in this solution. If we run them, they don't run on my local machine. They run up in the cloud in Azure. That's the beauty of the code space. So any other things that I might be doing on this machine, maybe checking email, 50, 60 tabs open in Edge, things like that that would normally compete for my local file, my local resources, are not affecting this. Those unit tests ran in their own isolated environment. As you'd expect with Visual Studio, I have a rich editing experience. I can set breakpoints and debug the application. And just like we saw with the Ballpark Tracker application, I'm able to launch the application. Oops, actually, got a breakpoint. So I'm able to check breakpoints as you'd expect. But let's go ahead and continue. As I was saying, I'm able to launch the application and view it from the remote with automatic port forwarding as you would expect. And that's a pretty sharp looking shirt. I might have to pick one of those up. When all is said and done, I can simply disconnect by exiting and come back and connect to the environment later. So let me recap everything that we've seen today. I showed you Visual Studio Code Spaces from VS Code Desktop and the browser connecting to Linux environments. And that's available today in public preview. You can go try that out over at online.visualstudio.com. I also briefly showed you our coming support for Visual Studio IDE and Windows-based environments, which is in private preview, as well as Codespaces integration natively with GitHub, which is also in private preview. You can follow the link to aka.ms vscs-docs to find links for all of those signups. We also saw some features that are built into Codespaces, like LiveShare and IntelliCode. Those are actually GA ready today, and you can install them on VS IDE or VS Code, whether you're using Codespaces or not. Hey, I hope you had a little bit of fun with this session. I tried to make it not so boring and try to be really demo heavy and have a little bit of fun. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My Twitter handle was shown at the beginning of this session, or you can jot it down now. It's NIKMD23. I'm the same thing at GitHub. Also follow the link or take a picture of this QR code. Now, I really hope that you're enjoying Build this year. I know it's a little different, and I hope you're staying safe. Thanks for spending time with me. Bye.